What's up, champs? Welcome back to Short Shifts, the twice-weekly amuse-bouche keeping you posted between the 8-course meal that is the Keeping Karlsson mega show every single Sunday. I am your host for tonight's event, Ben Burnett. Joining me, your other host, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my pal, my friend, my bud. How you doing on this fine Thursday evening?
Oh, doing good. Like I said before, we were chatting before, just on the Twitch stream. It's the new term, so I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking while I'm waiting for my students to come out of their shells a little bit. But it's a good warm-up for today. It's good practice for getting into the nitty-gritty here. Ottoman Empire during the day, conquering your opponents in fantasy hockey in the evening. It's all kind of in the same vein, right?
Yeah, and famously, I know you feel like you're conquering a lot of your opponents these days, so it makes sense that you're that's where your head is.
That is, you cut me to the quick there, bud. But
so,
we're turning things around in the right direction.
Okay. I didn't mean it to insult you. I was just speaking. Anyway, yeah, that was a little rude of me. Let's talk about, before we get into tonight's show, I do have a message from our podfathers on the Mega Show. Brian and Elon wanted me to let everyone know, those of you who have been kicking yourself about missing out on the chance to join the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, aka the Cupful, this season may soon have an opportunity to remedy the error of your ways. Louis and I are struggling to start the year, but that doesn't mean that you should feel like you can't hop in and start to succeed in the Cupful. So that what is happening is that the Cupful commish, an all-around great guy, friend of the show, Kevin Hebert, is doing an audit of inactive teams among the many, many divisions of the Cupful, and anyone on the wait list is likely to get a spot in the league, starting your ascent to the top tier this season. So all you need to do to join the waitlist is go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron, join the patron-only Discord group, and then follow the signs to join that waitlist. And you'll be competing against the best fantasy hockey players in the world. Louis, Brian, Elon, Cousin Dave, and then lesser players like myself. So just head to keepingkarlsson.com/patron and hang out with us. We are a fun group. Louis?
Oh, don't do yourself a disservice there, Ben. Come on now.
Yes, okay. I'm middle tier. Louis, I'm going to send it over to you. You got our first headline for tonight's show.
All right. Well, this one is a little bit somber, but definitely I think is the item that we need to lead off the show with, and that is that Chris Letang is out indefinitely after suffering a stroke. It is the second such incident that has occurred during his playing career. Luckily, it is being reported as minor compared to his previous incident, but of course, very concerning for the veteran blue liner. We don't have a ton to say about it, except that we hope that he will get well soon, and we are wishing him all the best, certainly. Because this is a fantasy hockey show, we are going to turn to our blackened mercenary fantasy hockey hearts here and talk a little bit about what the implications mean in terms of what we can see on the spreadsheet. And that means it is likely a boost in fantasy value for Jeff Petrie, though he has been rostered already in 71% of Yahoo leagues, so he's likely unavailable, but, kick around and see if he is hanging out there in your league, especially if it is, a shallower one, perhaps. So he manned the top PP by himself in Letang's absence. It is of moderate concern that they managed to be outshot 1-0 in nearly 3 minutes of power time with Petrie on the ice, but it's entirely possible. This is a real feelings ball take, but you'd have to imagine that their thoughts may have been elsewhere somewhat. Still, it's a fine spot to have, and Petrie fills the peripherals. He's likely to improve along the margins in those areas too, as he shoulders some of Letang's ice time. He saw his second highest ice time of the season last game, although it did go to overtime, as did his only other game with more ice. But 26 minutes is nothing to scoff at, especially with a power play 1 slot. So if he is kicking around on any league of yours, you might want to invest in Ann Arbor's own Jeff Petrie.
Louis, I honestly kind of feel like you're underselling Petrie here. Like, I feel like he has the potential to be a very, very good fantasy option rest of season, especially in a points league, just because he's already got the floor for the peripherals that you did mention. And now I feel like I mean, he's 2 years removed from being like a 60-point guy. Last year on the Habs, there were obviously a ton of things that were going wrong, but after Marty St. Louis showed up, Jeff Petrie started to turn it around. So I don't know, if I have Jeff Petrie, I'm feeling like I'm a huge boon, to a huge bonus as we move into a tricky part of the fantasy calendar. But yes, I suppose with Chris Letang as well, missed a couple months the last time that he had the stroke. I'm really happy to hear that he's doing well, and hopefully he does come back again this year, because I think the Penguins are more fun to watch with him on the ice, but like more importantly, also he obviously has a lot of passion for the game, and it's more fun when he's out on the ice.
Yeah, no doubt. Hope to see him back on the ice sooner rather than later.
All right, moving to an outjury in Columbus, the Blue Jackets activated Patrik Laine from IR today, beating the 3 to 4 week timeline that was announced when Laine was injured in mid-November. I do presume this spells an end to Gustav Nyquist's spot on line 1 in Columbus. I suppose we might have some lines available to us at this point, and I'll check after I finish speaking. Laine struggled this year with just 4 points in 8 games so far, and now he's returning to a team, of course, that's down one Zach Werenski on the top unit. But I think it's too early to write him off. And while he's been gone, Johnny Gaudreau has started to turn things around over the past few weeks. He's got 10 points in the last 7 games. And today in the Dauber Hockey Ramblings column, Michael Clifford cited a stat that was really surprising to me. In the month of November, Columbus was second in the league in power play goals per 60, just behind the Dallas Stars. And that's largely without Laine. He was there for 2 weeks to start the month, but has been out since November 12th. So I don't know. I really like Laine's bounce back potential here. I know that Elon has just traded Laine like 2 weeks ago, a week or two ago, while he was still injured and was clearly feeling a bit burnt by the slow start. But I'm still a believer in his potential for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I like it too. He's another guy sort of like Jeff Skinner that we talked about previously, who has kind of that higher floor because he's going to get his shots. And things haven't turned out the way we sort of hoped offensively in Columbus, and, they will continue probably to not go quite as well as sort of our loftier goals, just because, Werenski is out, and, they've run into some problems that are a little more than sort of we thought we might see from them. But even still, certainly an exciting opportunity. Johnny Gaudreau still out there, very productive, and this could be a great spot. If anybody jumped on him, during that injured period, I think that was a really nice move. Took advantage of a good opportunity, and, hopefully that'll pay off for those managers. All right, let's head over to what was probably the most exciting game of the week thus far. It concluded after we finished recording on Tuesday night for Wednesday's show. But that was Seattle traveling to LA, and not content with cracking open a 6-pack. They went for another half-pack after that. Winning 9-8 in overtime. And, as you do when you've had that much, you often, make a mess around your host place, and the fantasy ripples are still being felt. Cal Peterson, in the first year of his 3-year, $15 million deal, came in for Jonathan Quick, and, suffered at the hands of this, big time goal outburst. He ended up being waived by the Kings on Wednesday, cleared waivers Thursday afternoon. And should be expected to be spending some time in the AHL, trying to get his game back on track, basically. Peterson actually had the better save percentage, but he did give up a goal on a quarter of the 20 shots that he faced in relief of Jonathan Quick. I just have a hard time holding this loss against him. He was thrown in cold into a game that was already wildly out of hand, and I understand that there are good reasons why Quick wouldn't be sent down, but it does kind of seem like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to send Peterson. Maybe they just want to get him a little bit more time to, kind of get a handle on his game, and he will have more opportunity to make starts, I suppose, if Quick is your guy down in the AHL. But I'm definitely concerned that Peterson's save percentage has declined each year in the league, from the 920s in scattered starts over his first 2 seasons, 911 in his first real backup year, 895 last season, and just 868 so far in 22-23. He's likely to work on his game and wait for that call up. In the meantime, Phoenix Copley is going to be called in as the backup. But as a career sub 900 goalie, I would be looking elsewhere for starts. I'm barely interested in Jonathan Quick as it stands, and his backup is of no interest to me.
Yeah, I think if you're in a league where you are just looking for saves, or even, you know what, the Kings are a decent team. Maybe Jonathan Quick is somebody who will benefit from having a bit more of a rhythm in the crease and starting more games. I don't know. I will push back on the concept of this being a knee-jerk reaction to sending Peterson down. I mean, I agree with you, sure, that it's not really about one loss or, that the other night should determine who went down. Jonathan Quick absolutely blew me up in the kick-upful, and I think stuck me with a -4 points or whatever, just something ridiculous.
A mega goal.
Yeah, basically. Exactly. But Peterson is on a 3-year, $5 million contract, AAV, as you mentioned, and it's looking like a pretty bad deal off top. So for a team that needs cap space and probably was kind of hoping that somebody might take him when they waived him. I think that after the last 2 years, he's putting up terrible, terrible numbers 2 years straight. It makes sense to, see if you can't get out from the massive cap hit for a guy who is blowing you up every time you put him in. It makes sense to me, I guess.
All right. Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from, but I don't think it should surprise anyone that he cleared waivers with that $5 million cap hit and how he has performed lately.
All right, Lewis, we are heading over to Detroit next, where the Red Wings announced today that Tyler Bertuzzi would miss at least a week after being put on the injured reserve list. Bertuzzi left the Wings game against Buffalo early last night. Bertuzzi had 4 points in 9 games to start the year, including just 3 in the last 7 after returning from an injury that caused him to miss a month of action earlier this year. Just like Lucas Raymond, it seems like Bertuzzi is suffering after the Wings kind of improved that roster last offseason. Steve Yzerman picked up additional options to play alongside Dylan Larkin, and now that Bertuzzi is no longer staple to the top line, top power play, I don't think he's a must-hold in most leagues, and it seems like it's a slow for people to adjust, maybe because he went on the IR and then came off, and people probably giving him a little bit of time to get his game right. But right now, I think he is not really a hold in most leagues. If you have IR space, of course, it makes sense to stash him, and hopefully when he comes back, he either gets a better opportunity or he does something with it. But if you don't have the IR space, I think that Tyler Bertuzzi is a drop for me.
Yeah, and I think just thinking forward to next year, we hope that, the injury problems that he faced might be just, an artifact from last season and, so, a blip on the radar, but we're starting to see it become quite a bit of a pattern. He has now missed significant time this season on 2 separate occasions. Starting to think that maybe we got to talk about Bertuzzi as being a bit of a Band-Aid boy. Maybe something to factor into drafting for next season.
All right, Lewis, we are going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we've got a ton more players to talk about, including a whole team that's hot in Seattle and a couple of Jets that are turning it around after a slow start to the year. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, we are deep into the streak section of the show, and by deep, I guess I mean we are beginning. Why don't you start us off with our first streak tonight?
All right. Well, we got a whole bunch that we kind of got to talk about here. So many that I think we need to break it up and have each of us focus a little bit on some of the different Kraken players that we want to discuss. It's tough to have a 9-goal game and not build on some of those streaks, especially because the Kraken really have been on a roll, scoring over 4 goals a game over the last 12 or so. So we'll start with Justin Schultz, who we mentioned previously, as, a possible hot streak guy to try and trade. Hopefully you didn't get that done right away. He stayed hot, managing 3 assists, bringing his streak to 10 points in the last 6 games. This included 2 power play assists on only 36 seconds of power play ice time. But I guess you don't need much power play time on ice when you score the instant you step on the ice. Jared McCann joined as well. Only 14% rostered on Yahoo, scored twice at even strength to build his streak to 7 points in 6 games. And though his ice time remains low for a rosterable player, between 15 and 17 minutes, I think he's worth riding at least while the Kraken are scoring like this, and maybe longer depending on how deployment shakes out. Certainly playing with Jordan Eberle and Matty Beniers right now is the spot I want him to stay if I am holding.
And speaking of Beniers, added 2 goals on 6 shots in the 9-8 drubbing to improve to 11 points in the last 5 games for Beniers. Definitely safe to call that 6-game slump firmly in the rearview mirror at this point. And it's been great to see him pick up that torrid point pace that he had to start his career late last year. Unfortunately, the most recent game against LA is the first time Beniers has had more than 2 shots in a game in the past 15. It's possible, if he can keep up a 22% shooting percentage, he could still score 30 goals this year, but that's not a rate that we often see people hit. And it's just tough to see him hold on to, even a 55, 60 point pace if he doesn't up the shooting from more than 2 shots a game. So I am very cool selling high on Beniers in 1 year leagues, or maybe a limited keeper if somebody wants to pay out the nose for potential, somebody who you might be able to get some really good short-term value on to go for a ship. Looking over to Jordan Eberle, line mate of McCann and Beniers, posted 4 assists against the Kings, now up to 10 points in his last 6 games, has also upped his shooting since we last discussed him, Lewis. Eberle is averaging nearly 3 shots per game over the last 10 and pacing for 78 points through 22 games. Unfortunately, when you look under the hood, those rate stats indicate he's not really likely to maintain that pace. So if you can find someone, again, I'm happy to sell Jordan Eberle at a 70-point pace. If you can find somebody who is much more likely to maintain that pace, slam accept and do not look back. And the final player we wanted to mention on the Kraken is Jaden Schwartz, who, despite the 9-goal outburst, took one singular, solitary, lonesome, sad, emo shot on goal against the Kings, was otherwise just on the ice for a cardio session. Schwartz has just 4 points in the last 12, though he did have a stretch of 3 points in 2 games very recently. But over that 12-game stretch, the Kraken have scored 51 goals. Schwartz has been on 4 of them. So along with Oliver Bjorkstrand, who we mentioned on Tuesday, I'm good with leaving either of these 2 on the waiver wire until we see that there is a reason to pick them up.
Yeah, that is certainly a grim number for Schwartz. Unfortunate to see, certainly. Just a couple items to comment on. Definitely like to see the shooting from Eberle, like you mentioned. You were talking about selling high on Beniers for a limited keeper. I really like that idea. From what we've seen from the Kraken, we haven't seen a team that is, ready to put out a top line and really give them top line style minutes, 19 plus minutes a night. And I think that really does put kind of a ceiling on him, besides obviously his youth. So yeah, I think if you get someone who is kind of chasing the horizon and they're willing to give you something of nice value right now, I love that idea of potentially trading Beniers while he's on this crazy heater. And while people are kind of salivating over what he could do in the future, you could cash in on someone who's doing it right now. All right. Well, we got to leave Seattle and head over to Winnipeg. I want to talk about Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler has been really unstoppable since our buddy Elon traded him away. He recorded a hat trick and an assist in a 5-0 destruction of Colorado, giving him 10 points in the last 5 games. The scoring has just been so fun this season. I love how huge these streaks are, even for these, somewhat available players. Now, I do worry with Wheeler about how his shooting remains suspect. His 3 goals are the only goals that he's scored while on this streak. The rest have been assists, and they have come on just 8 shots over the course of those 5 games. So well under 2 shots a game. He's been deployed with Scheifele and Perfetti and is on power play 1, so his lines look nice. And at about 50% rostered, I'm interested in picking him up. I wouldn't expect the goal scoring to continue just because that shooting is pretty anemic. He's an interesting ad while he's hot if he is available, but this is not a guy that I am pursuing for his hot streak value in any kind of trade. Just somebody that I want to pick up for free if I can.
I feel the same way, I guess, that I'm not going wildly out of my way to get Wheeler, but I mean, ride him while he's hot. That's exactly where I'm at with this guy as well. The next player that we wanted to talk about, Lewis, is actually Wheeler's line mate, Cole Perfetti, and somebody who I have to eat a little bit of crow about tonight. I'm not too proud to admit when I'm wrong, and Andy on the patron-only Discord group asked us to talk about whether Cole Perfetti was a season-long hold before Tuesday's show, and I preempted that discussion in the group chat with a simple no. And then Perfetti went and, changed his nickname from Goal Perfetti to Cole Assisti, coined by our pal John Newhold. Perfetti put up 3 assists in the 5-0 win you mentioned earlier. So obviously remains on that top line with Scheifele and Wheeler. Also on power play 2. So it's really not must-hold territory to me unless he continues to stay hot. But at this point, Perfetti is a 55-point pace guy on the year. He does have 5 points in his last 3, which is great to see. And the main thing with Perfetti that I like is he's a great stream option this week in deep leagues, in particular with the Friday-Sunday schedule to finish off the week. There's a chance that he's turning a corner here. So, you might be able to get him in your lineup for a nice stream. And if he continues to put up points, like if he puts up 2 points or 3 points over the next 2 games, then you're starting to wonder if he's somebody who should be sticking around on your roster for a little while. So it doesn't seem like Nikolai Ehlers is walking through that door anytime this week. So Cole Perfetti, a decent option for you.
Yeah, that's tough. We have such high hopes for Ehlers. We finally get to see him getting the sort of deployment we've always thought he deserves, and then to have him be out for this extended period. But we can't sit around thinking about what might have been. We've got to take advantage of what is there now. And, this opportunity for Perfetti is not something to necessarily, let go by the wayside. You like to see that deployment, certainly. And if Wheeler isn't around, then maybe Perfetti's a guy that you want to grab onto. Or even, if you count shots, especially, Wheeler might be a guy to dodge and Perfetti may be the guy to go to before him. One more trip over to Detroit. We had a request to talk about Philly Hronek. This guy has just been a revelation on defense for fantasy managers, ranking as a top 15 defenseman in the cupful and coming at very little cost, certainly significantly less than his fellow Detroit blue liner Mo Seider, who has been mired in a little bit of a sophomore slump. Not terrible, but just not being as productive as certainly we've seen from Hronek. He has largely done this at an inflated shooting percentage at both even strength and on the power play. At even strength, he's scoring more than 3 times his rate from last year. And on the power play, he has scored twice on 7 shots. So obviously that's a pretty small sample size, but 28% is not what we should expect to see from anyone on defense on the power play moving forward. He's obviously overperforming, but that number, with so few shots, that number is going to change as he adds them pretty quickly. He has managed to maintain a 9% even strength shooting percentage once before over 65 games in 2019-20. So I'm not saying that even strength scoring is necessarily going to fall, but his career average is considerably lower. So as exciting as he has been, I would expect him to regress a little bit maybe at even strength, and especially on the power play, at least from the gaudy numbers that he has put up in this very limited sample size. There also is always the threat that Seider does get elevated to that better power play position, especially if Hronek goes on an extended bit of a cold streak. So someone I'm definitely interested in, but I would say his position as that top 15 defenseman right now is a little, built on a bit of a shaky foundation.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing with Hronek that really stands out to me is if you look at the pace, he's pacing for 50 assists this year. Just absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, that to me, when a defenseman is pacing for 20 goals and you want to know if it's sustainable, the answer is basically always no. If it's not like Cale Makar or somebody else that you're drafting like long term in that space. But what's interesting to me is that for Hronek, he's still on pace for 50 assists, which would make him rosterable as a depth defenseman in fantasy leagues on its own. A 75-point pace so far, 22 games into the year. And when you want to dig into those advanced stats, the 5-on-5 shooting percentage is overblown. His IPP is too high. His power play IPP is way too high. And his secondary assists those are about average. So it's good to see the turnaround. Certainly, this appears to be the best season of Hronik's career from an expected goals and a shot driving metric standpoint. I think that Filip Hronek might actually be a 50-point guy, but yes, he is a definite sell high at this level. I think, though, that he as a hold probably is going to be a rosterable player for the rest of the year, just based on what we're seeing from him, his deployment. It reminds me a little bit of Hampus Lindholm, I guess, a guy who I don't count on putting up the offensive totals that we've seen so far. But I think that what we are seeing from him is going to still be enough once he starts to come back down to earth. And that's what I expect to see from Hronek a little bit, is that, if you can, I guess if you find somebody who's willing to, if they think they're selling high, this might be a good buy high opportunity as well, is sort of where I'm coming from. Not to say that you should send anybody that you drafted high, but that you should maybe be able to get in while the getting is good, even though the point totals are still quite high on this season.
Hey, my fellow Cupful managers, feel free to send me your Philly Hronik for Victor Hedman offers. I'm grabbing at never mind. Cut this.
Is that true? Would you take that deal?
No, I wouldn't take it.
Interesting. I don't. Yeah, that's a tough one.
I don't know. It's a tough one. It is.
That's I almost would say you should. I know. Should you maybe take it? I think you might should maybe take it.
maybe, but I feel like the I don't know. I don't know that the opportunity is worth the I don't know, the sort of the fantasy manager metaphorical faceplant that you would be required. I feel like it's too shameful to do.
Here's the move. If you're deciding that you're moving on from Hedman, this is not to you specifically, but just in general, you go look for, not maybe Philly Hronik, but a guy who you think is going to put up 50, 55 points that is overperforming. And you try and get Filip Hronik, who, you think that he's going to be not this good, but pretty good. And then you get a forward upgrade as well in the deal.
Yeah, there you go.
You try and it would be way too much to do in a 1-for-1, but I think that there are swaps that would make sense for Victor Hedman rosterers that don't believe he's getting back up on the top unit. I would probably just hold because the upside is just so high, and I don't know that you're getting anywhere close to that upside back in a trade. I'll give an example of sort of what I mean by that, which is Evan Bouchard has been on my roster in the Cupful all season. There was a stretch there where I started to wonder if it was worth it. And right now he's back on the top power play. I'm not counting on him staying there, but the reason I held on to him is he, even as my last defenseman, how much is he really costing me from that position? He's still putting up a couple of fantasy points a night or whatever. If I'm just dropping him or if I'm just swapping him out for another low potential player, it's hard to beat yourself up over holding on to an underperforming defenseman with high upside is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. I think like you said, I think I would want to leverage the name a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. And I think that does make a lot of sense. Try and get a throw in there maybe too. And who knows, you might end up with an improvement at forward and an improvement on defense if things keep going the way that they're going.
Woof.
Whew.
All right, Lewis. That's all the time we have for tonight. For myself, Ben Burnett, I'm signing out of here. Thank you all for joining us, Lewis. I look forward to seeing you again next week, my friend.
Absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, whether it is on the Twitch stream or downloaded from the Keeping Karlsson feed. Please be sure to give us a follow at ShortShipsKK. Of course, you can find Brian and Elon at Keeping Karlsson, Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme, and I also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News NHL, all organized so nicely at GameDayLineTweets.com. Make sure you visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.